So the championship season returns. Who's going to go up? Who's going to go down? I think Ipswich Town are very much the common favourites for most people to win the championship title. But for lots of people, there's a bit of disagreement over second place. Some people will go for Southampton's. I've gone for Birmingham City. Some people will go for Sheffield United. Leicester City, of course, coming down from the Premier League with the parachute payments as well. And I think that also 22nd is quite an intriguing spot because most people would have Sheffield Wednesday and Hull City for relegation. But there's a lot of disagreement over 22nd place as well in terms of who's that team that's going to drop down and join them. Some people have gone for Oxford United. Others have gone for in my case, Preston North End. But I think I'm really intrigued to see how the championship plays out and whether there's going to be a surprise team that sort of breaks into the top six, because as much as there's lots of sides that have a great chance of breaking in, Coventry I didn't mention, they would probably fancy themselves as a top two contender as well. There's also teams like Norwich City, who have added a little bit more peak age now to a youthful, talented squad under Liam Manning, who got Bristol City into the top six with an arguably much less talented squad last season. And there's Millwall, who were one of the form sides in the second half of last season, again with a young and up-and-coming squad. So who's going to go up automatically? Who's going to make the playoffs? And who's going to go down? That's what we're here to discuss on this episode of EFL Debate. And so if you like what we do here, you can get subscribed to us on YouTube and on Spotify. We'd really appreciate that. We're bringing you weekly championship podcast and content on EFL Debate over the course of the 25-26 championship season. Delighted to be joined for another season by my co-host, Ollie Mann of the excellent Sheffield United Way. Always such a pleasure to spend an hour with you, Ollie. So thank you so much for joining me as co-host as once again. I mean, as a Sheffield United fan, are you starting to move on to another season and get yourselves up for it?
Yes, yeah, we've seen pre-season, we've seen Sellers ball. We know exactly what we're going to expect now from Sheffield United. We've started to see a little bit of movement in the transfer window, and so it's looking forwards, no longer looking back, because looking back fills me with sadness and a deep pain in the center of my stomach. So we have to move on. We have to look forwards. We have to think about the future. And yeah, getting excited now. It's 2 weeks. Well, just under 2 weeks until the new season starts. And yeah, it's the perfect time to be thinking about and building that excitement. And I, for one, I'm getting very excited. You'll have seen me, obviously not for the viewers at home, but Gab will have seen me in his little corner screen whenever he was bigging up teams he was going through. And I was sat there going, I was going to win it. Because we're all just ready for more EFL to get back at it. And yeah, I'm very much looking forward to the new season now that we're here.
Absolutely, me too. Well, let's not waste any more time, Ollie. Without any further ado, let's get up our respective championship tables. On the left, it's my predicted 1 to 24, which you can check out on freebets.com, 18 plus, gamble responsibly and all the rest of it. And on the right, it's Ollie's 1 to 24. I don't think that we need to go into a huge amount of detail on the ones that we agree on, Ollie. I would rather get stuck into the ones where we disagree, because I think those are the juicy ones. Second place, I'll make the case for Birmingham City. But first of all, I'd love you to make your case for Southampton to achieve automatic promotion this season.
Yeah, I just think, we're talking about a team now who they've come down from the Premier League. And yeah, look, there's an elephant in the room whenever you talk about Southampton. It's the same elephant that United had last season. They were awful. They were truly and utterly awful in the Premier League last season. There's no getting away from it. There's no hiding it. We all have to accept that fact. But the other side of that coin is that the Premier League and the Championship, as United ourselves proved last season, and Burnley, there's a huge jump. There really is. And this season, there's not an outstanding Championship team. There's no Leeds United, who are guaranteed to be right up there at the top. The best of the rest is currently Sheffield United, I would say. I think we are there, but we haven't necessarily got better this summer. We don't know what we're going to look like. We don't know the changes. Whereas Southampton, they come down. They've got an exciting new manager in Will Still. Do we know whether or not his amazing abilities and the things he's done over in France are going to translate to the Championship? We don't. And that is a question mark. But I think he's got enough about him. I think he's shown enough that we can probably expect with what's going to be one of the strongest squads in the Championship. He should be able to get a tune out of them. And when we talk about one of the strongest squads in the Championship, let's just talk about their midfield and their attacking options. When you look at players like Mateus Fernandes, if he's going to be there, is there going to be many players better than him in the Championship? Well, there might be one midfielder better than him in the Championship, probably Shea Charles. And so, oh, wait a minute, he's also going to be in the squad at Southampton. They've got an exciting winger who, if he's not going to be there, he's going to be sold for 50, 60 million pounds in Tyler Diblin. We know that he's going to be exciting, and this could be a massive season for him in terms of his development as a young player who could just tear apart the Championship. We then look at their strikers, and I mean, you go down the list, and it's a who's who of the best players in the Championship of the last 5 years. Adam Armstrong got his move to Southampton off the back of being one of the best strikers in the Championship, one of the top scorers year after year. Ross Stewart at Sunderland, he's had his injury problems, but when he's fit, was probably universally agreed to be the best striker in the Championship. Ben Brereton Diaz, somebody that United took on loan last season because he was better than what we'd got when we were a top Championship team. You've then got the exciting youngsters who've got a little bit more to prove. Cameron Archer tore apart the Championship with Middlesbrough, has had 2 so-so Premier League seasons, but there are goals galore in this squad. And is it unbalanced? Potentially. But I think there's so much quality in this team that it's hard not to back them for promotion. The question mark for me is going to be in goalkeeper. You know, a lot of reports today that Ramsdale's likely to leave, might end up at Newcastle. But even if he does, Bazunu has been in the Championship before. And yes, there is a question mark about him. But I do think, you know, he's starting to come towards a proper age now. He's 23. Yes, he's coming off the back of an injury, but could now be starting to develop into the goalkeeper lots of people expect him to become. I just think looking through their squad, if that isn't in the top 2, then something has to have gone dramatically wrong because they look unbelievably good.
I mean, I can't say that I massively disagree with you, Ollie, because I've got Southampton third, right? And I think that if they can keep one of Mateus Fernandes or Tyler Dibbling, either one of them has potential to be player of the year. I know Jay Robinson, the sort of versatile forward they've got coming through the ranks, is very highly rated there as well. So he's another one that you come into the equation. So, yeah, I think there's loads of reasons to be excited about Southampton, along with the adaptability of Will Still, his flexibility, how aggressive his sides can be against the ball, willingness to change formation and adapt to things that aren't working. Lots of cases for. I suppose my question mark, Ollie, would be they are starting from quite a way back in the sense that they did get 12 points in the Premier League last season, and the record low points in the Premier League was Derby in 07-08. So again, 11 points.
11, didn't they?
Yeah, so good pub quiz knowledge there. So I think that's where I'm slightly cautious.
And I get it. I do get it. But again, you know, I'll look back to last season. United got 16. So comparing the Premier League seasons of Southampton United, Southampton's was worse.
Yeah.
It was worse. And, you know, they only got 12 points. They almost broke that record. But, you know, compare them 12 months before that, Sheffield United got 16 points. They're only 4 points better off. Sheffield United broke all kinds of records for being awful in the Premier League. They conceded 106 goals, 104 goals, whatever it were. And we were a team who looked just absolutely battered and bruised coming out of the Premier League. But there really is that big of a gap. And United went on to earn on the pitch 92 points last season.
Accumulated 92 points.
We accumulated 92 points last season. And that's on the back of one of the all-time worst Premier League seasons. That's where it came from. And so I think history suggests to me that actually having a bad season in the Premier League doesn't necessarily always translate into a continued poor performance level, into a continued pain. I think they'll come down to the Championship looking for a little bit of redemption, potentially looking for a little bit of catharsis. And I think they should be able to get that with the squad, with the rebuild they've got. They've changed the manager to bring a bit of freshness into it. I think some of the players they've got coming back off loan as well won't have had some of that pain, some of that suffering. Players like Ronnie Edwards, who can maybe just make it a little bit fresher for them, can really help them try and get over what they suffered last season. And I think you're right to have a question mark about it. But for me, based on the experience that United had last year, I think I can back Southampton to quickly overcome that and attack this as an all-time great Championship team.
Interesting. I think that I'll make my case for Birmingham City then.
Yes,
Talking of
the
talking
money
of
bags. If you can say it, Gab, without saying that, if you can get through this without saying Tom Brady's name, we'll all say that we've done well and go home.
I think talking of all-time great teams, we did get 111 points in League One last season. And I think, as you'll know as a Sheffield United fan, sometimes, if you have a brilliant season in League One, that can give you momentum to go on and win promotion the next 2 seasons. And I think we can obviously take inspiration from Ipswich as well. And I would also make the argument, what I love about Birmingham City for this season, Ollie, is we're not just, I was expecting us to go into the season, right, and be like Ethan Laird, Christoph Clara, Pike Sung-ho, Tomoki Iwata and Jay Stansfield. Those are the go-tos that are definitely going to start and will add quality, 6 starting players around that. But what we've actually done is we've strengthened areas where we're already strong. And what that means is the players that I've just mentioned, who were absolutely unbelievable last season and gave us, for certain generations of fans, the most enjoyable team ever to watch at St Andrews, they've got to then go again, up their game again. Christoph Clara is an absolute Rolls Royce for a centre half, brilliant in the air, thumping in the challenge, brilliant passing range. You can ping the diagonals. You've got Tomoki Iwata, who's that metronome in midfield. You've got Pike Sung-ho, who just touch of a feather, the agility, the turns, the quality that he brings. His passing range is insane. You've got Jay Stansfield, who scored 20 goals last season, and I think he might even do better in the Championship because you've got more open ground to get into, which is going to play into his strengths. Ethan Laird as well, I'm a massive fan of with those rampaging runs. Chris Davis has changed the mentality of the club. He stamped a real clear style of play on this team. And so, yes, I get that firstly, it's a big step up from League One to the Championship. And it's also, for teams like Southampton and Leicester and Ipswich, they are coming down from the Premier League, which is an insanely high level. But I think from our starting point, which is like a really amazing team with a real winning mentality, and we've added to that and we've signed to sort of throw the gauntlet to even our best players last season. I think we've got a real formula to go and attack the league and say, come on, we can go for automatic promotion.
I mean, the transfers are insane. You look at some of the players that have come in. United were rumoured to be in for Bright Osei-Samuel. We were rumoured to be after Tommy Doyle. 12 months ago, Man City were rumoured to be after Kyogo. So we are talking about a talent, and the players that Birmingham are coming in is to build what would look like a super team. I think for me, there's a couple of question marks where I don't think it's major. I think I've got Birmingham 4th. I think they are going to step up. I think they're going to take to the Championship really well. And I think they're going to be an outstanding side. I think for me, the question is to bridge that gap to Southampton, to Ipswich. It's are they ready for that jump? Are some of these players who we know are outstanding footballers like Jay Stansfield, like Iwata, are they ready? Having had a season in League One where it has been easy, let's be honest, not in a rude way, no disrespect to League One, but it was easy for them playing at that level because they were just so much better than it. Are they ready for that step up to take on players, to take on a level that is now going to be a more level playing field? And I think that's the question for me about Chris Davis as well. I think his job is insane and nobody should underplay. Taking a good team to win the title is one thing. Taking a good team to get 111 points is utterly ridiculous. And it's not something that you can do. But this is a different challenge this season. The challenge isn't go out there and win with the best team. It's go out there and find a way to win when you don't have the talent advantage. And I think that's going to be a real thing for me where I want to see it proved that they're ready to do that. I think I have a lot of faith that Birmingham, and if I'm honest, if you ask me to pick a playoff winner today, that might be my bet for them. And I'm not against the idea they will be promoted. But I think for me, it's those question marks. It's that, are they ready to just go again. Not many teams can do that. And I think it's a huge ask, particularly for a manager with not that much experience beyond one unbelievable season with a significant talent advantage. Have you seen enough from Davis that you think he's ready to adapt to that in terms of taking on teams like United, like Southampton, like Ipswich, who are going to come with such a talent advantage themselves, even in comparison to this Birmingham team?
Yes and no. I do kind of recognise where you're coming from. I think until he proves he can do it in the Championship, certainly from an outside perception point of view, there probably will be that question mark. I think that's reasonable. I think from my point of view, firstly, I would make the point that it really makes a difference that he's coached in first team setups before, even if he hasn't been the number one, because he's learnt from the likes of Brendan Rodgers and Postecoglou as well. So I think that's a pretty big factor. I like his mentality. I like that, as well as some of the ideas that he's got and some of the innovative patterns of play that he's introduced, that actually he does also have that aura, that sense of, when he speaks, you listen. And I think that can be a really important thing. And I also like how he's sort of stamped a style of play, which you don't always see that necessarily. Sometimes you see a group of insanely gifted individuals that are kind of just win because of the individual quality. And we undoubtedly had that individual quality last season, but it wasn't just that, because I don't think you get to 111 points on just that. So I think there's those things that make me really confident that Chris Davies has got what it takes to meet those challenges. And then I think, just as I was kind of alluding to earlier, I love that we brought in the left centre half who played for Derby, Island Cashin, because that means that there's going to be real competition between him, Newman, and Christophe Clara, who would all have their different merits to start last because. So that's a really exciting thing. Tommy Doyle's an insane addition to the midfield. I can't imagine not starting one of Paik and Iwata, but that prospect excites me, that they've got to raise their game again. And then we've signed Furuhashi. So if Dave Stansfield wants to be number 9, he's got to bring his game up another level as well, because you've got Furuhashi, who's an incredible goal scorer at Celtic. And we've added Damari Gray for that bit of pace as well in those attacking and wide areas. And I'm still expecting another 2 or 3 to come in. So it's that combination of the faith in Chris Davies, his leadership qualities, but also the additions that we've made that not just strengthen areas that could do with upgrading, but also strengthen areas where we're already strong and bringing that competition, which was really exciting.
The final question then. You've answered me on the manager. You've answered me on most of the outfield team. But Gab, last season we saw Leeds try and get promoted with a goalkeeper who had a moment in him, shall we say, in terms of the way he's taking it forward. Do you have the confidence, if James Beadle's coming in to be your number 1, that he isn't going to have a Meslier moment, which could be important as we get down to those sort of parts of the season when it's going to get tight, when it's going to get difficult? We saw last season at Wednesday, he had a really difficult time of it. I know the under-21s won the tournament, but I thought he had quite a poor tournament with England over the summer as well. Okay. Do you feel as though he's ready for the expectation that might be placed on me?
I actually think that there's a fair chance that Ryan Alsop's going to be our number 1 on the opening day. Because, and I'm a little bit surprised that I'm saying this, because if you'd asked me sort of midway through last season, I would have said, when we get to the Championship, we're definitely going to need to sign number 1 goalkeeper. But actually, Allsop's performances in the second half of last season, or even the last sort of 3 quarters of last season, let's say, they were really strong. And he makes a massive difference to us from his quality of distribution, and is really important to the way we play from that point of view. Now, is Ryan Alsop a top Championship? And I would probably agree with you that could be one area of question mark. Although Beadle also, as much as last season for Beadle didn't quite go as he exactly would have hoped, he did have a very good half season at Sheffield Wednesday initially, and he's already got sort of 18 months of, 2 years of experience under his belt, because he had a centre crew as well. So I can see where you're coming from, but I think it could be Allsop starting the number 1 jersey with Beadle providing the competition.
Interesting. Well, we shall see. We shall see. I'm sure there'll be plenty of people watching who have got other ideas about who's going to come second. Obviously, some people might be screaming at me to say, where's your confidence in your own team? Oh, I just don't think we're quite there yet in terms of how the squad's being pulled together. So, yeah, I think we're probably relatively comfortable that we both think Ipswich, we both think Southampton, Birmingham United are going to be in the top 6, and that we both think Coventry.
Yeah, I think what I'd love to do is really home in on the areas where we're a little bit different, because there's some fantastic content on all teams across various different platforms for the people. But I'd love to kind of home in on the areas where we disagree a little bit. So do you fancy? I'll leave it up to you, Ollie, if there's an area where we're a bit different.
Let's work us way down then, and let me ask you about Millwall and who's going to take that final spot in the playoffs. Because we've agreed on 5 teams, but we seem to have a bit of a debate on Millwall, and I'm saying it's going to be Norwich. Why do you think Millwall are ready to make that jump to take that last playoff spot?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because Millwall were one of the form sides in the second half of last season. I do have a bit of a bias for young squads that got a bit of senior experience the year before and are kind of on that nice upward trajectory. And I see a bit of that with Millwall. I like the fact that they've got a young squad, but they've also got a manager who knows how to ally developing young players, which he's done very successfully at Hamilton Academicals and Preston North End, but also knows how to ally that with an efficiency. And I think that they've really hit the sweet spot on the nose with Alex Neil. They've got somebody in Mihajlo Ivanovic, who I think has potential to be one of the top goal scorers in the Championship this season, if not be, because of his ability to score all different types of goals. And then they've got Jake Hooper, who's a very reliable centre-half at this level, alongside Jeffrey Tanganga. And they've got Casper Denori in midfield, who I'm a big fan of as well. So, yeah, I would go with Millwall, and I like their form in the second half of last season.
Yeah, they certainly came on strong. I do like some of the additions they've brought in. I think Josh Coburn, I know he was there last season, but I think there could be a really nice pairing between him and Ivanovic. They really seem to work it really sensibly together. And I think there's potentially a really good player in Coburn if you can keep him fit and get him playing. You talked there about Casper Norrie, but I love that they've added Luongo in midfield. I think that's a really smart addition. I think picking him up, obviously, he was such a leader in that Ipswich team that got promoted back-to-back from League One into the Championship. And so I do like a lot of the business that they're doing. I think for me, the real question marks that come through is, they are a young squad. We have seen them developing really well. But last season, I'm looking at the Championship, and I think at the very top, first, second, third, it's not as good as it was last year. I think those positions aren't going to be teams who get 100 points. I think they're going to be filled by teams getting like 90, 92, something around that.
I think I'd agree with that, yeah.
But I think the middle is better than it was last season. I think we're going to have a really competitive, really strong clutch of teams in and around that playoffs. And I think Millwall benefited last season from it being a little bit of a lesser quality league, shall we say, in terms of how some of those teams came together. And I do think that while I think it's still good for them, I think it might look like a step back that they end up in sort of mid-table, but I just think they've been overtaken by the business that's been done by so many of these other teams. And that's what brings me on to Norwich City, because we're talking about a team who have recruited so well for my money. I really do think that they've done a fantastic work this summer. They seem to have gone really smart in terms of the way that they're bringing in their sort of overseas recruitment. I think there's a lot of confidence as well. The new owners have come in, and you think about, what that might mean for Norwich. They've spent so much time being economical, getting promoted, staying within their means, coming back down, getting promoted, staying within their means, coming back down. And then it stopped working. They stopped getting promoted again. So then they've come into this summer, and what Napper has kind of done is said, right, now that we've got the new owners, we've got a bit of money to spend, we can loosen our purse strings, we can have a bit of a go at it this season. And some of those signings that they've brought in are players who I think you would probably have expected to go at a higher level. Talking about Jacob Wright, obviously coming in from Manchester City, he was there on loan the back end of last season, but he's a lovely footballer, a fantastic player who certainly you would expect to be right at the top in terms of the players playing in the Championship. the players they brought in coming from abroad, and we're talking about players like Jakov Medic, where he's coming from Ajax, and this is a real statement kind of signing. We're not just talking about what we were going to do with our new owners. A lot of the players on their list have been on my big long list of players who United should have been looking at, and I'm going, well, they've gone. And then I went through.
Wow. How geeky are you? How geeky are you, Ollie, looking at your European, stats and data?
I am an absolute loser, Gab, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise. I have wasted many an hour on hypothetical nonsense that never went anywhere. But a lot of those players have now come into Norwich, and I really love the business that they've done. And I think it's building a really strong championship team. But they've not just done that. I feel like they've really centered it around getting experienced pros as well. The sign of Harry Darling, I think, really shows the intelligence with which they've started to recruit. They've not put all their eggs in the European basket of bringing in these players. They've said, actually, there is still the best of the championship. There's a pool here that we can access quite easily. And they've brought in Harry Darling. But I thought he was a good manager. I thought he was doing a good job. And I thought it was harsh that he got sacked. But the manager they've brought in this season, for me, was manager of the season of the championship last year. Nobody did a more impressive job in last season's championship than Liam Manning, getting Bristol City into the playoffs, turning that team from what was mid-table obscurity into a team that, it didn't work out in the playoffs. They had lots of reasons around that. But I thought it was such an impressive job. He's gone back, obviously, towards his home, where it might be better for him, given some of the family situation he's had over the sort of recent years. But I think that's a fantastic recruitment. I think they've got good players through the door, a great manager in charge. And for me, that just points to a team that's massively on the up. If they can keep hold of Sargent, then my word, we'll be talking about a team who really can aim high. I do think he will leave, but I think they've recruited well enough now that they can afford to fill in around him and not leave as big a gap as maybe he would have done if he'd left 6 months ago.
I completely agree with you. And what I also really like about Norwich City under Atanasio is that whereas previously they were a self-funded club, so all the incoming business they were able to do basically depended on making their big money sale, ideally right at the start of the window so they can get cracking. This time round, it's no, we'll buy first. And if we're going to sell, you better damn hit our price valuation. And that's what I really like about this sort of iteration of Norwich City. And I think Mike Atanasio is taking Norwich City into the modern era with, first of all, I think they're quite well set up from a recruitment point of view, but certainly from that investment side, it's difficult to rely on crowd money these days in the current era. And I think that investment was really important. I agree. I like that they've recruited those kind of peak age players. And actually, I do think there's a lot of players from last season, again, really big on development, young players who had that exposure last season. I think they can go up again, and players like Oscar Schwartau, for instance, I think he showed enough last season to think, this guy can go again, and because it's often the second season, isn't it, where young players really take off. So that's that I'm excited about, I'm sort of not sure why I had the ninth.
As you go through it, it's so funny because I find this season in particular, you can make a case for so many teams finishing fifth, finishing sixth. There's so much that people. But if you sat me down with a fan from about 14 of the team, you'd see me go, I reckon they could make the playoffs. Yeah. And it's just the way that you have to take it down. But for me, Norwich are the team that have just jumped out at me all summer. Every transfer that's come in, I've gone, I like it. Every move for the manager, I've gone, I like it. And I liked their squad anyway. And I think players, like you say, you shouted out Swattow, but I really like Cernach. Yeah. I think he's really ready to have a really good season, particularly if Sargent leaves. I think he could explode as well. So, I think there's a lot to like about Norwich. And so that's why they're the team for me that's going to take that last playoff spot.
I'm still keen to see the developmental aspect of Liam Manning and how he can nurture young players. That bit's probably why I've got them just outside. I'll take on. I've got to call you out on Oxford United, Ollie.
Yeah, I know.
Here it comes. Because Gary Rowett, Ollie, such a reliable Championship manager. I've looked up the records of his 11 years on and off of managing in the Championship since coming
You're
into
so
the level in
geeky, Gab.
2014. I know. I'm a massive loser, Ollie. That's what it is. And his teams have never lost more than three consecutive league games. And I think that if you churn out points with that level of consistency, he's very good at when you hit a low point, a bit of a lull, he's very good at stripping everything back, really plummet under Gary Rowett, I think. And if you look at those 11 years, he's only had one half season where he's managed like at Stoke, where he's managed a big budget, and that didn't quite go to plan. But other than that, he's managed teams with the lower budgets, and other than the stint at Birmingham where he actually delivered, I think it was 11 points from 8 games, which is pretty much top half form. He's always kept the team up, and certainly if he's started a season in charge or spent a certain amount of time of a season in charge, his teams don't go down. The Birmingham issue was just back end of the season a bit of a freak. So I don't think you can go against. For me, I can't go against Gary Rowett because just such a consistent, reliable Championship manager that you're just not going to go
and he's a really good, safe pair of hands. And I think this is the big doubt in my mind, if I'm honest, about having Oxford where I've got them. I think they're going to be the third team that gets relegated. I think that looking at the league this season, I think the teams that have come up were all three of them better than the teams that have gone down. I think that they're three really strong teams who come into the Championship with a good level, which makes me think that they won't get relegated. I think Charlton were the team that I most had my eye on, as if to say, are they the one? I think they've got better. I think they've done fantastic business through the window. I think they've done more than enough. I've still got them in and around that space because where else?
I know exactly.
But I think they're really good. I think they've recruited really well. I like what they've done. And so I just can't see a relegation in their future. Whereas I look at Oxford and it feels to me like as you go through their squad man for man, the success they had to stay up last season becomes more and more impressive. I look through the team and I think it's just a team that I don't see as being of Championship quality. I think they are performing above themselves and are going above and beyond thanks to the great work of Rowett, because of the great work of Des that he'd done before. They're a team that have outperformed themselves. But to take it back down to a level of, where do I see actually long-term sustainability? Well, when Gary Rowett came in, they won 35 points from the point he came into the squad, which was the 7th most in the Championship. Sounds unbelievably impressive. Their underlying numbers, their expected points were 27, which would have had them 23rd in the league. Their expected goals were 27, which was the worst in the league. Their expected goals conceded was 43, which was the 21st worst in the league. Their expected goal difference was minus 15.5, 23rd worst in the league. All of the underlying metrics, even under Gary Rowett, had them as one of the 3 worst teams in the league. They were overperforming all of their metrics, but how sustainable is that? And as I look at this season, I see a stronger Championship. I see a stronger relegation battle with 3 teams coming up who are more good enough to not just stay up, but to do quite well in the Championship this season. And I look at Oxford as being quite vulnerable, that they've got to get everything they do right this summer in order to give themselves a chance to stay where they are. And I think that they're vulnerable. And as I looked at that league, they were the team that really jumped out to me to say, actually, how sustainable is what they did in the second half of last season? And I don't think it is. I think that if they do exactly the same level of performance again, they will regress to the mean. They will lose more games of football, and ultimately it'll see them drop down into the relegation battle. But I know you want to shout at me and scream at me through the screen.
So for Preston North End, I think that now this was a little bit of similar reasons to you with Oxford United. There's an element of who else kind of thing, and you've got to use a bit of a who's the detective, a bit of Morse, a bit of Barnaby, if you like, to try and find somebody who's going to go in with Hull and Sheffield Wednesday, and I suppose. I think for me, so in normal circumstances, I possibly would have put my faith in Paul Heckingbottom, a bit like you with Rowett. But I do feel like he's put himself in a difficult position with his comments after the 2-1 loss at Hull in April, where he said something along the lines of, how I feel I would put a bomb on this group and start completely again. And the start of the season comes and he's got 15 players under contract from last season. And it's like, hi guys. Always believed in you. I didn't really mean what I said. But it's a little bit of that where it's like, how do you motivate those players? Do you not say it? Do you not try and motivate them? In which case it's a bit awkward. Do you try and motivate them? In which case it might feel a bit hollow to some of them. I think that's going to be a really awkward dynamic. And I think that what they've done is they've basically, in terms of the recruitment, I actually like the signing of Odell Afire, who did well at Blackpool last season. And I like the signing of Thierry Small, who did well at Charlton. But I think what they've done is it kind of a bit like adding a decorative flag to a sandcastle that's just been knocked over, in the sense that that Paul Heckingbottom has said what he said about most of his players. And he's kind of burnt a lot of bridges there. And I think the recruitment is decent in certain areas, but I don't think it's enough to sort of outweigh some of those other challenges. So that's why I've gone with Preston North End rather than Oxford United, as you have.
Yeah, I can certainly see it, but I've got a lot of faith in Paul Heckingbottom. Obviously, I saw him during his time at United, and I thought the one thing that he was unbelievably strong at was team spirit. I think if anybody can mend those bridges, bring this team together, create that sort of unit and a real dynamic to take them forward, I have a lot of faith that Heckingbottom would be able to do that and get the players bought in. I think as well, one of the signings that I think really does elevate Preston's level that you didn't reference there is Everson in goal. I think he's a huge improvement upon Woodman. I know, obviously, Woodman's off to be a favourite number 3 who can sit and get his money. But I think Everson's a fantastic sort of goalkeeper. I think he really does elevate them. I think he would win them points that last season they were missing out on because of not having the strength of their goalkeeper. I like the business, like you've referenced there, of Fire and of Thierry Small in particular. I think they do, again, make the level of Preston just slightly better. And while there are question marks, I don't think they're going to have a good season, I think they've done enough that they can probably just about keep their heads above the line. I think the big thing for me is there's a gamble here. And it's on Daniel Jebison at centre forward, because we know that they've lost some of their sort of shining stars like Emil Rees, for example. We know that they haven't quite got everything they had previously. And they've put a lot of faith in Jebison, somebody that Heckingbottom's worked with before. I don't know if that'll work. And I do think that if it doesn't work, they might struggle to get the goals they need to stay up. And that's my biggest question mark, my biggest worry about them. But as I've looked it through, I have enough confidence in Heckingbottom that he'll get this team together, he'll get them organised, and he will just about, by hook or by crook, keep them in the Championship. But I don't think they're going to have much fun.
Yeah, that's a fair point. So, Ollie, over to you then. Do you want to challenge me on one of my predictions?
I think there's a really interesting one here, and I think that we've agreed on it, if I'm honest, Gab, but I think there'll be viewers who watch this who want to question us, and they'll want our justification for why have we both got Wrexham in lower mid-table? I think they're 16th to 17th.
I thought you were going to say Portsmouth, because we've both got Portsmouth in 12th, but we can come on to that. But Wrexham,
well, I think they're the two that we probably need to talk about next. But I really think there'll be people watching this saying, Wrexham in the bottom half. Why have you not got them higher? They're trying to sign Christian Eriksen, Gab.
Yeah, I know. It sounds a bit low when you say it like that. I think in terms of spending power and potential in the long term, I've got every confidence that Wrexham, one way or another, in the next 2 or 3 years, will build a top-end Championship team. But I think you've got to be very mindful of the timescales, because although the finances are unlimited, the number of windows aren't. And so you've got to be there's a real trade-off in terms of keeping the spirit and the synergy of the group that's achieved what the group's achieved over the last 3 years, whilst also adding enough quality. And I think that if they try and go too quickly, they'll have no real sort of team spirit or harmony, because they'd have ripped at the squad up, which isn't really how they've gone about things. I think the way they have gone about things actually is by largely keeping faith with the group that's got them there, but making some marquee signings like Josh Windass, like Lewis O'Brien, like possibly Christian Eriksen if that one happens. Although some of these things can be sort of paper talk, so you never quite know. Yeah. But I think so that's what I'm kind of just mindful of. I think they've definitely bringing in some top end championship players, but I think as a squad en masse, I still think that it's going to take a few more windows for them to get to where they're ultimately looking to get to.
Yeah, I think they're a really interesting case study for me because I think they are, like you say, I think they've brought in some fantastic players who are going to be good. I like Ryan Hardy up front. I do think that, in a Plymouth team that struggled as much as they did, he was one of the players who always caught the eye in terms of I think he'll be good for getting the goals. There's talk that they'll have Kiefer Moore from us, and I think that could be a really fun partnership up front, actually, in terms of a little and a large going together. I think Windass is a fantastic player to have brought in on a free transfer, obviously. Maybe we'll come on to the reasons for the bottom two being the bottom two shortly. But I think some of the business that they've done is really eye-catching. I really like Lewis O'Brien as an addition. I think he's a great player to have brought in. But for me, the reason that I've got them where I have is that actually I think Wrexham have had a consistent way of doing their business, which is generally speaking, they buy older, established professionals who they know can do a job and who at the lower levels have generally been from the level above. So they've bought players who they know are old enough that can do a job at League One, and they've played them in League Two. They've bought players who they knew could probably do a job in the Championship. They've played them in League One. They're now at a level where they're buying old established pros who we know can do a job in the Championship. And actually, with the move of the Championship recently to being more about physical profile, we're talking about athleticism, we're talking about the impact that a lot of these games are going to have. I actually think the style of squad building that Wrexham has done doesn't quite fit. And so I think there's a mismatch between they've signed really good players, but have they got the right physical profile, the right blend of squad to really get themselves pushing up towards the playoffs? And that's been the question mark for me. So I think we both are very consistent in where we see them, but I know there'll be fans out there saying, what do you mean? They've signed all these great players. They'll be fine. I just think they are a good side. I think they will be more than stable in the Championship, which is a massive amount of success, we should say. That is.
Well, I think that's a really important thing.
That's an insane season. They've done back to back to stay up. Yes, please. That would be a huge achievement. And so I don't want
can I also just come in there, Ollie? Sorry to cut you off slightly, but I think that's a really important point that you've hit on. I think that there's actually a large portion of Wrexham fans that would actually agree with us and say that's actually a really good achievement to finish 16th in the Championship for year one. Obviously, they do have that long-term ceiling and potential, and I think that's really exciting. But I think for year one, I think a lot of Wrexham fans are quite sort of realistic about that in terms of the stage they're at. So just to feed into what you're saying.
Agreed. Completely agreed. And so I'm glad to hear that. And I think the only thing for me is, if they do finish 16th, and if that is the season, the question mark that starts pinging in my head is that there seems to be a noise on Phil Parkinson. And I do think that at some point will become a question that we might see answered, whether that'll be this season, whether it'll be next season. That's the other question for me about what their long-term aim is in terms of success in the Championship and how long before they look to transition away from that old style into maybe something new, like the physicality that I was talking about them missing in terms of maybe a different style of coach. But that's certainly not a conversation for this season, and certainly would be unbelievably harsh to a man who should be forever a legend at Wrexham.
Absolutely. What an astonishing job that he's done, even if you take the money into account, back-to-back promotions is unprecedented. So let's should we have a look about Sheffield Wednesday? Because one thing that I was quite curious about to hear from you, Ollie, is you actually wouldn't write off Sheffield Wednesday entirely, where probably most Championship pundits would. So just talk us through that a little bit.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? And it was one of those where when I was putting my 1 to 24 together, I knew that for all the credibility of myself, of the show, of the entire thing that we do, I had to have Sheffield Wednesday in the bottom two, because everybody knows the disaster that has been, the off-field issues that has happened to Wednesday over the last 6 weeks, never mind over the last 6 years. that has caused this real ripple through the club that has really come to a head this summer, where we've seen the departure of key players so many times that they've not been paid, so many issues that have seemed to keep coming through. But when you strip it back to the way that, and I'm a United fan. Everybody knows I'm a United fan. So some Wednesday fans will discount everything I say. Some people will think that I just talk rubbish because I want to try and laugh at Wednesday. And that's not the case. In this scenario in particular, the main thing is that you get rid of Chansiri. And as a city, we need to get rid of him because this isn't about football and the impact on Sheffield Wednesday. It's about actually there are friends, family, people, normal people living in Sheffield who aren't getting paid, who are turning up to do a job and then not getting anything for it. And that is a disgrace. So everything I say from this point onwards is going to focus on the football, but we shouldn't get away from that being the key message of that's still got to change regardless of what happens next.
100%.
However, when you actually look at Sheffield Wednesday at the moment, last season they finished in mid-table of the Championship. Since their relegation from the Premier League in 2000, they have very rarely finished in mid-table in the Championship. On the pitch, they are arguably as good as they've been in 25 years in terms of how they've taken it forward, in terms of what they'd started to build up until last season. You then say, they've had some departures over the summer. We don't know what's going to happen with the future of Barry Bannon. We know that they've lost Michael Smith, Josh Windass, Gassama and Masaba. They are a big part of the squad, but they've still got the crux of the team that played last season and that for a majority of last season looked like potentially flirting with the playoffs. They've still got the base of that. They have got some exciting youngsters coming through like Rio Shipston, like Piers Charles, like Kadamatri up front, where they actually have started to bleed them into the team anyway. They were getting minutes towards the end of last season. Piers Charles had already become the number one. There is a reason to think about some of these players as being ready to play in the Championship. And so suddenly you start to look at a starting 11, of which I think you yourself said, Gab, about 9 of them at least are decent Championship players who would be competitive, who would be able to take a team forward. You then look at the managerial, and there has been so many questions about Danny Roll. Is he going to stay? Is he going to leave? He has tried his best and done everything within his power to get another job. And nobody has wanted him for whatever reason that is. But nobody has taken him on. And so he's currently back at Hillsborough, somebody who we know is a very good manager at Championship level. And if he leaves, they've got Pedersen waiting in the wings, somebody who's committed to Hillsborough, committed to Wednesday, and clearly sees himself as being a long-term manager for the club. And so despite all the off-field issues and mess and problems, I actually think on the pitch, there are some reasons to think that Wednesday aren't just a write-off. Do I think the season will be fun? No. Do I think they're going to be a really good Championship team? No. But do I think they could be competitive at the bottom to try and start to pick points away, to get themselves in the conversation for staying up? I actually do think there's a decent chance of that, because I think they've proven themselves to have a manager who's competitive, who can make a team who are cut adrift and written off at the bottom of the Championship perform well above their level. Danny Roll did that 2 years ago. We then saw a squad that was built to be a mid-table Championship team. They've still got a multi-million-pound striker in Ike Ugbo, who in the first 6 months he was at Hillsborough had a fantastic run, was a key part of them improving to the point where they stayed up, where they were competitive. If he can find that form again, he can be a good player at the level. There are reasons for hope for Wednesday. And I think that's the key thing for me, is there are reasons for hope. And I think everybody writing them off as just being dead and buried, unless a points deduction comes their way, I think they could be competitive. And I am certainly not sat here saying that they should be 100% guaranteed they'll be a League One team, because I just don't think that's the case. I think on the pitch, there are enough green shoots that they can be competitive and they can stay up. Whereas I know that seems to be a very at odds opinion to anybody else I've spoken to, which makes me feel real weird. I'm like, am I missing everything? And maybe I'm not putting enough credence on the difficulties off field and the impact that has mentally, emotionally, on the way that they're going to represent the club and what it actually means to them. If you're not being paid, are you going to turn up on a Saturday and play to your maximum level? Are you going to be motivated to go and above and beyond for everything that the club needs? Maybe not. And maybe that does drag them there and means that they end up absolutely cut adrift. But for me, looking at them as an on-the-field option, I think there's enough there to say they can be competitive. And that's apparently my hottest take of the season.
I think I think if the player if the wage payment issues happens in March, where you've only got a couple more months of the season to go, I think there's a case to say that the players will sort of battle through and, they'll find the solutions at the end of the season. But I think with them happening before the season, if that doesn't get resolved, I think it's going to be a long, hard season for everyone involved. And so it really does all depend on what happens. I think the next 4 weeks are going to be crucial, Ollie, because it's not only would a takeover impact what they can do in terms of incomings and adding to the squad, which they do need to if they want to have a competitive championship squad, but also to pay the players that are there. Because let's not forget, even if we take the assumption, which the 9 players that we've mentioned do stay, which I wouldn't say is a likelihood given the circumstances, you would probably beyond that, there is a lot of youngsters that would have to step up, like a George Brown or a Rio Shipston, and they would have to, the youth would have to do a lot of the heavy lifting. Otteg Bio, I think, defender as well. So I think, a lot's going to be dictated by the next few weeks.
And I do think, though, the other thing from my perspective is that there was reports a few weeks ago that there was a takeover, an offer accepted. There's been lots of mixed messaging ever since. But, a lot of the conversation there has been that, Wednesday are for sale and there is likely, potentially, a new owner coming in. And I do think that would galvanise everything at Hillsborough. And one of the things that we've seen, and in fact, Gab, can I text at you and you say this? Because if I say this out loud on a video, I'm going to like a fool. But we have seen in recent times, I'll say it.
You're serious? I was like, I was going with it.
I'll say it, Gab. I'll just get cancelled at Bramall Lane. It's fine. We have seen in recent times that if they can get the positive feeling going through Hillsborough, for example, a new owner comes in and they're really ready to fight against it, they can have a galvanising aspect on what happens at Sheffield Wednesday. The fans can drag them forward. And so if a takeover is completed in the first 3 months of the season, the galvanising impact that will have for the entire football club could be massive. And I do see that as being quite a realistic possibility. I think there will be a takeover. I think there will be a change of owner, which sees the payments sorted, which sees some of the wider issues at the club resolved in a timely manner. And that then gives them a huge platform to just use that good feeling to power them up as well. So alongside a squad that is, for me, light on numbers, but I think at least competitive in the Championship, give that a galvanising impact of a new owner, the rise of fan support that will come through at Hillsborough, come through the entire Wednesday fan base. I think there are reasons for them to think that there is a corner not that far ahead of them. And once they've turned it, they can start to look a bit more positive again. They can start to look up. They can start to see themselves as a competitive Championship team and a team that can stay up this season if they can get those first bits right. And I see that happening. And I do think maybe it's the pessimist in me, but I think they'll get it right. And I do think that come the end of the season, they'll be a hell of a lot closer than most people think, if not able to get themselves over the dotted line.
Interesting. Well, I applaud your reasonable, objective analysis of the situation, Ollie. I think it's a slightly tougher situation than that, but really interesting to hear your thoughts nonetheless. So any more? I think the biggest outlier from what I can see, Ollie, unless you'd like to throw one in there, is probably QPR. We're 9 places away. I don't know if we disagree on anyone more than
QPR and Stoke, I think, are the two, aren't they? Are we 8 places apart on Stoke?
So Stoke, you've got them. Oh gosh, yeah, we're quite away on Stoke. So do you want to take? I tell you what, do you want to take on QPR and then I'll take on Stoke and we can?
I'll take on QPR. You can take on Stoke. And the big one for me is that QPR, for the first time in a long time, I'm going to say the sentence, I think might have had a great summer. And it sounds weird to say that about a team who obviously lost a manager who was such a galvanising impact for them. Somebody who, we talked about Danny Rowley's impact at Wednesday. Martin Cifuentes did just as good a job at QPR in terms of galvanising them, taking them forwards, really sort of building them up to be a competitive mid-table championship side. And then he left. And he said, I don't want to be here anymore. And he just made it very clear that he was not going to be the manager of this football club. He didn't want to be anywhere near it. And we've seen him move on and go to Leicester, being replaced by Julian Stéphan. I think that's a nice appointment. I think, we've seen there somebody who at Rennes in France has done a pretty decent job with what he had available to him. They were competitive. I'm not saying that they were one of the best teams or one of the best jobs you'll ever see. But I think he has done enough there to really prove himself as being a competitive, good manager in not always the best circumstances. And then look at the business that QPR have done. How many teams wanted Kwame Poku? He was a really wanted man through numerous teams in the Championship, teams right at the top of the Championship all the way through. Birmingham.
Yeah, would have.
Birmingham wanted him. United wanted him. I thought one of us two were guaranteed to get him. The next thing he pops up at QPR. Amadou Mbengue was one of the best centre-halves. That partnership he had with Tyler Binden at Reading in the Championship, in League One, was outstanding. I think he's a fantastic pickup. Somebody, again, who will really elevate that squad. Give him a bit of youth in defence as well, because I think they've obviously been so reliant on Steve Cook in recent years in terms of making sure they've got that solid back line. They're adding a bit of youth to it, and I think that's a really nice addition. I then look at some of the players that they started to bring in and sort of bed into their team last season. And I think there's a real reason to be optimistic about what QPR can do. I think that if you take out the terrible start they had last season, they were a mid-table team. I think they've improved themselves in terms of the squad that they've now got available to them. I like the managerial appointment that they brought in. I see no reason that they will get worse. And I actually think there's a real reason to suggest that if you take their level for the latter half of last season, you apply the improved squad notice, there's no reason they shouldn't be looking upwards and thinking, actually, rather than lower mid-table, we should be an upper mid-table, maybe starting to just think, could we? Could we? Now, no, I don't think they can make the playoffs, but I think they'll be a good team this year. I think they'll cause lots of teams a lot of problems. And I think we'll see a really good QPR side who finally seem to have really got themselves in order off the pitch in terms of the business that they're doing and the way that they've built this squad together.
I'm coming round to that, Ollie. I think Christian Nuri divides opinion at QPR, but actually I think if you look at the recruitment last season, I think they brought in individual players, even if it didn't always mesh as a team. They brought in individual players that really improved them and added quality. Players like Jonathan Varane and Kieran Morgan, to give you a couple of examples. The lad defender who's at Bayern Munich as well, Liam Morrison. And I think they've added to that to sort of an improved squad this year. Enough with the signings that you mentioned there, enough to maybe counterbalance the loss of Sheffield Wednesday, which I would view as quite significant.
Kept Jimmy Dunn as well, which obviously we didn't see happening end of last season.
Jimmy
I think that's
a
really underrated move in that, we talk about the players they've brought in, but actually I think it's a real statement of intent that they've kept Jimmy Dunn at the club. I think that's a symbol that maybe he's looking at them and thinking, well, I wanted to leave, but I'm seeing what's happening here, seeing the work that's going on, and I want to stay and be part of it. And I think that's a real sign of confidence that even the playing squad have got in the changes that are happening at QPR for me.
Absolutely. I think the reason I've gone with Stoke City, difficult club to trust, aren't they, at Championship?
I will never trust Stoke City.
Yeah. And you know what? It's a fair position to take. I think from my point of view, I look at somebody like Ash Phillips, who they've got back on loan, Maxime Talavierov as well from Plymouth Argyle. I like the left-sided partnership between Eric Bocat and Beijing Ho. And I also really like Divin Mbama, who they've got on loan from Manchester City, who's very highly rated from the PL2 scene. And so there's lots of reasons for me to have a bit of belief, along with the fact that they've got a manager in Mark Robins, who I think he can manage a club as well as a team, and that's what I like about Mark Robins. And I think that his eye on the big picture, the operational side, I think is going to be a real help and a steadying hand for Stoke City, which is why I've got them in the top half. Obviously, I think you would struggle to go too much further than that with Stoke City because they've only ever finished in the bottom half since coming down to this level in 2018. But I am going to back them to make that tiny step into the top half.
Yeah, and I like some of the players. Obviously, I think the way that they've taken it forward, I do like some of the sort of way they've looked to approach it. I think, though, Wouter Berger is a huge loss in the centre of their midfield. And I do look at their midfield, and that's one of the big question marks I've got. Obviously, I like Mark Robins. I think everybody does who's ever paid attention to the Championship. He's a great man and a great manager. But I think for me, there's still this sort of wider question of Stoke seem to bring in decent players without really building a squad. And I'm looking at their midfield and I'm thinking there's gaps there. I'm looking at the way they've brought in these players. And I just think, A, I can't trust Stoke City because they're Stoke City. But B, as much as I do like some of what they're doing. I think they're still ignoring big gaps as part of their squad building, which really asks a question mark for me of whether or not it is sustainable for improvement, or if it will be eye-catching and ultimately disappointing, as it has been so many times in recent years.
Okay, so I know you've got to head off around 5:30, haven't you, Ollie? So we'll do a kind of quick fire round with some of the ones that we agree on. We'll go to either end of the table. I'm going to throw it over to you, to Ipswich Town. I'm sure you'll represent my point of view really well. Why have you got Ipswich Town as your championship title winners?
I mean, they're just comfortably looking like the best team in the league, aren't they? I mean, it's one of those where, as you look through, I talked about Southampton earlier, and the fact that their squad just looks ridiculous for the level. Well, it's very similar for Ipswich, but Ipswich have also got a manager who we know is a known quantity. Kieran McKenna did a fantastic squad building job at Ipswich in League One. He then built an absolute winning machine that ran through League One, only not winning the title because Plymouth did something insane to everybody, I think, in terms of the points they got. They then came through into the Championship, and you thought, right, the squads, they're not ready. Are they going to be able to do it? Well, they ran straight through the Championship. Another fantastic promotion on their run. And I think of the teams, I know that maybe they struggled in the Premier League. Lots of people do. But I think for much of the season, they look like one of the most competitive teams in the Premier League of the promoted teams. They looked like the most likely to stay up if anybody was going to do it. You then go through the squad, and I think there's not really any area of the team that I look at and see a big gap. I'm not looking at any weaknesses. I couldn't say, oh, United are playing Ipswich on Saturday. Tell you what we'll do. We'll attack. I don't really want to go at Leif Davis. We'll go down. Oh, no, I don't want to. Okay, they're going to beat us, because you look through their entire squad and it is just stars for the level. Jacob Greaves and Dara O'Shea with Luke Wolfenden as that sort of centre-back options that they've got available to them. They would walk into just about any other team in the Championship at the moment. We then go into their midfield. And again, they recruited so well in the Premier League that they built a squad that was ready for relegation if it happened. They brought in players like Amari Hutchinson. They brought in players like Jack Clark, where they brought them in with an eye on the Championship. They knew that, A, they might help us stay up because they're exciting talents, but B, when we got relegated, we will have a Championship All-Stars team that is ready to go again. You add that to the players that they'd already got at the squad, people like George Hurst, Nathan Broadhead. This is a team that is just ready to compete again. I've not even talked about Sammy Smodics, for example, who was the Championship Player of the Year top scorer 2 years ago. And I'm not even talking about him as one of their key men. They are so good in terms of the squad build. And like I say, with a manager who is a known quantity, we know that Kieran McKenna is an outstanding manager. We know we can get the most out of this Ipswich side. And I just don't see any weaknesses. So for me, they are the outstanding team in the league. And I am very confident that in 9 months' time, we'll be talking about them as champions.
Absolutely. I'm going to take on Leicester City because we've both got them just outside the top six. Bit of a controversial chat. I understand if there's some Foxes watching that would feel a little bit aggrieved to be out. First of all, I think the fact that there's a possible point deduction kind of plays on my mind a little bit with this one.
Me too.
Secondly, I think that this is a big rebuilding stage for Leicester City. I think there's some big questions being asked at the top of the club, both literally and metaphorically. And also of Director of Football John Rudkin. And I think that it's a squad that stagnated a little bit over the last 3 years through poor recruitment. And I think that some of those problems are going to come home to roost. Now, I do see a world where they do finish in the top six because they still have got 9 of the title-winning squad from 23-24 still at the club, as well as a prodigious talent like Jeremy Monga and others. And Monga, by the way, could definitely be a star of the Championship this season. And really looks fun to watch, doesn't he? Yeah. So I'm thrilled to see him. And you know what? I do like the appointment of Mighty Fuentes as well, with the flexibility that he's got. So I think there's a case to say Leicester City still finish in the top six, but I've gone with them just outside because I think it's a bit of a rebuilding stage for the club. Ollie, I'm going to throw to you Portsmouth because we've both got them in exactly the same position, which is 12th. Can you put forward the case for Portsmouth?
Yeah, I just think they're a good team. And I think they were a good team last season. I think we saw them have one of the most difficult starts you could ever ask for as a newly promoted League One side. I think opening day, they had Leeds. I think within the first sort of 5 or 6 games, they played Burnley, they played all of the big boys very early on in the season, which meant it was really difficult for them to ever get any momentum and to really get themselves going. Add to that, they were obviously missing Colby Bishop for such a huge part of the season. And they were really against it for so much of last year. And that saw them always in and around that kind of relegation conversation where people thought maybe they're going to drop off. Maybe they're going to be a team who gets dragged into it. But they always had more than enough to keep themselves out of trouble. And I think actually if they can sort out their away form in particular, which is where they struggled so much last season, there's no reason why they can't be a team that just move comfortably up towards mid-table. I think for me, they've got one of the outstanding attackers in the league with Murphy. I think that actually he will be a standout player who might even be the kind of player who you're talking about in player of the year conversations if he has the season that we know he's capable of. Because last season, there was nobody who I thought was more impressive at Bramall Lane than the partnership of him and Bishop. I think that elevates their floor so much in terms of what they're going to be able to offer and how they're going to be able to go. Think as well, manager. Massinio is just a good manager. He's proved it now over multiple seasons with Portsmouth. He's really started to elevate them. And I think he's more than good enough to really start to look at as saying, yeah, I think he's going to be somebody who can go to the top. And it's how long does he stay with Portsmouth, or does he actually start to think about getting a bigger job? Because there's certainly going to be people out there for him. I then like the business they've done. I think they've brought in sensibly. I like John Swift as an addition. He's been obviously a really standout championship player for a long time. If you can keep him fit, we know that he's had those difficulties, but if you can keep him fit, there's no reason why he couldn't once again be a standout player, playing in a really exciting attacking unit. If you think about him, Murphy, Bishop, all of a sudden, this is a team who I'm looking at and thinking, they're not just going to be quite good. They're going to be great to watch. How much fun are they going to be? They might be my neutral's choice of the best team to watch in the championship because they just look like a team who's going to be able to go forward. The final one I'll just shout out is Mark Kuznovski. If I've said that anywhere near correctly, I'll do my best. A player who United were rumoured to be looking at. Another one on my spreadsheet, Gab, who I was going through, he ticks some boxes. This kid, think he's going to be a player in the Championship. He could be a real impact. Well, he's chosen Portsmouth over interest from teams like United. And I think that, again, is a statement of intent and of real confidence that they're a team ready to kick on. And I think they'll have a better start. And I think if you take out the first sort of couple of months of the season, they probably would have been about 12th anyway. They're a mid-table side, more than good enough to make that jump.
Yeah, and just finally from me on Portsmouth, I back them again to take a ton of points at Fratton Park because I don't think it's going to matter who they're playing when they're at home, because I think that the atmosphere that they create at the home fans create at Fratton Park, we saw that back in the Premier League days. It's the same 20 years on. I think actually in the intervening period, they've been at lower levels where they've been more expecting to win, and it hasn't always necessarily played into that strength, whereas I think we're seeing that return again. And I think that's going to be a massive strength for them, especially with a real pressing style of play. That translates lovely with that raucous home support. And so I think they're going to be a bit like Millwall have been in the last, recent years in the Championship, that horrible place to go where even if you're a top side, like you're almost like get out there with a point kind of thing and put it in your bucket and move on. And I think Portsmouth can have that and take a lot of points off the top sides at home. And also just finally, I do like John. I think John Mazzino might stay at Portsmouth because I think if he moves, he's going to have to prove himself all over again, whereas working under a sporting director like Richard Hughes, who I rate very highly, and at a club where he's adored, I think it allows him to grow with a club and build a club up that way. So I hope that we see that. So really excited about Portsmouth, and I'm hoping for big things from them at this level in the next few years.
Yeah. Let's talk then, Gab. We said we'd go top end of the table. Let's have a look at the bottom. So talk to me about Hull. Because obviously some people might be looking at that and thinking, wait a minute, 12 months ago, they had Liam Rosenior and they were going to get in the playoffs. And we thought they were going to be a really good side. What has gone wrong there in the last 12 months?
Yeah, I put a lot of stock in stability off the field because I think that ultimately determines the trajectory of clubs, what happens at the top. And that's the reason why I'm not sure about Hull City. The cash flow issues are a massive red flag for me, Ollie. in terms of how the finances are going to pan out for the remainder of the season. And I think that's going to create a really uncertain environment with a squad that, by the way, has been recruited for various different managers and that Sergej Yakirovic is going to have to adapt to. Now, adapt he will, because I do like the reviews that Yakirovic has got from people that I've spoken to. He's generally won with dominant teams across the continent, but he's also showed in Turkey last season with Kayserispor that he can get a team out of trouble in difficult circumstances and really organise the side. And he's got Dean Holden alongside of him, who's got that knowledge of English football. So I do give Hull a chance, a bit like what you're saying with Sheffield Wednesday. Yeah. But those financial issues are a big worry for me. I question the operation at the club. I question the strategy behind everything. And I think a lot of the problems that we've seen at Hull City in the last couple of years are going to come home to roost. So that's why I've got Hull in my bottom three.
No, agreed. And it's very similar for me. I think, similar to what I said about Wednesday, if they had a takeover, I think they could fly. But I don't think I've seen any suggestion that Hull are even in the realms of thinking about takeovers or changes in terms of the ownership structure. And that for me is why I see the two as being slightly different. I also think that there's much more chance that at Hull, they just kind of implode it themselves in terms of trying to chase or change managers, get points deductions. It just feels like there's no end to what could happen at Hull this season in terms of the way they might take it forward. And where with Wednesday, I kind of see them as having gone through the tunnel and maybe able to see the other side. With Hull, I feel like they're just going into the tunnel, and that's a really scary place to be. So obviously we want to be wrong. I look at the squad and I think there's a lot of good stuff in that squad. I think Charlie Hughes, Cody Drammer, there's players there who I really look at. I like some of the recruitment players like Semi Ajayi, but yeah, for me, just think that there's going to be some kind of implosion there. And I think it's been coming now for a couple of seasons where it's not one of those where on the pitch things have gone okay and off the pitch they've fallen apart. They've seemed to go hand in hand where they were going really well. And then as soon as off the field has gone, they've dropped together. And that's why I see Hull as being a team who really are in trouble and have a lot to do this season, particularly with the threat of, EFL sanctions hanging over them.
By the way, on Hull City as well, I actually think their defence and maybe deeper midfield areas are okay. And Panda as well, the goalkeeper, I quite like. So on that area, they might be fine if we're just looking at the football side. But their only senior striker right now is Kyle Joseph, and I don't happen to regard him as championship level. And where's they're having to loan out Mason Burstow at the moment. So where is
Bolton today?
Yeah, exactly. So they're not. I don't know if they're going to get the quality that they need.
No.
Ollie, such a pleasure to kickstart our championship season this afternoon. So thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. Big plans for Sheffield United way this season?
Yeah, obviously we're just looking to try and build things from what we've done last season. We're going to try a few different bits. I think we've been doing match reactions for a long time now, and usually, it's you go to the match, you get home, you sit down in your chair, and you think we're wondering about trying to get them done in the stadium to try and get a bit of a feeling for what's going on at the ground. We're going to keep things going with our match previews. I think they're going to become live this year, just because we want to try something a bit different. Every season, we're trying to mix those up just to give it a different flavour, because it can get old and people can get a little bit familiar with what's happening. So, yeah, we're really excited to try and keep things going, really trying to build ourselves up on sort of a few of the social media platforms as well. TikTok, Instagram, you should see a lot more from us just trying to work through that kind of thing, because, I think we've realised that we just want to try and do things a little bit differently. And, hopefully people like it. That's the main aim.
I'm sure they certainly do. Ollie, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks to everyone for watching at home. This has been the first EFL debate of the new season, looking at the season ahead in the Championship, and we'll see you again very soon.